Hi, my name is Mathieu Cailler. I'm a writer of poetry, prose. I've written some novels, some short stories, some poetry collections, children's books, screenplays. I love to write, I love to tell stories, so I try to find the best vehicle for each of them. My newest book is a story collection from Hidden Peak Press, Forest for the Trees and Other Stories. This book is 15 diverse, eclectic short stories focusing on people's pain, kind of their day-to-day struggles, and sometimes, if they can make it through, a bit of glimmer of hope. Sometimes it maybe doesn't work out for them as much. Some are fun stories, some are lighter, some are darker, some are more thriller-esque. Today I'm actually going to read to you from the titular story. Always a tough word to say, I don't know why I went with that. The title story, let's say, Forest for the Trees. It's the second story in the collection. It was published by Hidden Peak Press, and how I got to know the editors of this amazing publication, Kyle Newman and Justin Rampy. And from there, we kind of developed a nice rapport. They nominated the story I'm about to read for you for the Pushcart Prize. We began a nice relationship, and I sent them this manuscript that is now this book with this a really cool cover from a Polish photographer, and Jacob Wensk, I think is his name, if I'm pronouncing it correctly. I know Jacob is pronounced correctly, but just seen the name in print. So yeah, it's a really fun book. I think you'll enjoy it. It's available where books are sold, and you know, it's great. What I've been hearing from the feedback is that it's great in the sense that you can read something in a single sitting, and I think there is some value to just like being able to kick back and read a story during your lunch break or one before bed. And so people seem to be connecting with it. So here we go. Forest for the Trees is actually the title of the piece as well, because I'm not saying that word again. What's that? Emily turned Caleb's way and knocked a pillow to the floor. She said it again. Caleb said, half asleep. That noise, Emily said. She placed her hand on Caleb's chest. Do you hear that? Caleb took a second, rubbed his eyes, and worked his tongue around his mouth. It's just the wind, sweetie, or a raccoon. I've seen a lot of them lately. He opened one eye and took in what he could. Emily was sitting up in bed, both her hands in tight fists, craning her head back and forth. Just relax, baby. Go back to sleep, Caleb said. Even though it was only early November, winter had already arrived, announcing its presence last week with a snowstorm and consistent below-freezing temperatures. Just then a gust swooped through the White Mountains and rattled the roof of their secluded cabin. The long-tongued draft agitated the remaining flames in the nearby Franklin stove, inducing a succession of machine-gun pops that startled them both. You're right, Emily said. Maybe it is just the wind. She dropped back into the sheets. A minute passed, and Caleb tried to get comfortable. He tossed and turned and lined his gaze with the ceiling. Moonlight broke through a slit in the drapes, forming a white Rorschach-style blot on the ceiling that resembled an M16 rifle, the weapon he'd carried while serving in Afghanistan. Go long! A football spiraling across the sky, Sergeant Wiggins going deep, a landmine, Wiggins' femur poking through bloody skin, Caleb scooping him up, waving down a Humvee in the distance, feeling warm blood wash over his arms. Caleb, do you hear that? What? For Christ's sake, the noise, that noise. Caleb sat up and took a peek toward the doorway at the opposite end of the room. There was a figure, its silhouette tall and strong, backlit by what little light the Franklin stove's embers had left to offer. Emily stared in the direction of the figure, most likely believing that everything was fine because Caleb was still. When her eyes made sense of the person in the doorway, she didn't scream. She trembled. As the bed shook beneath him, Caleb wedged himself tightly against Emily and wrapped his arm around her quivering stomach. He then reached for her hand, but her fingers were too rigid to be held. Don't move, the man said. His voice was deep and soft, hard to hear with the wind whirring outside. No Superman shit. Just stay there, both of you. Stuttered breaths escaped Emily's mouth, one after the other, and Caleb's heartbeat sped up, switching from sleeping rhythm to a jogging-like clip. Please, Caleb finally said, just don't hurt us. Take whatever you like. We don't have much. I'm a park ranger. My wife's a painter. Shut up. The man was still camouflaged by the darkness. He hadn't moved an inch. None of his features were visible. Caleb went on. "There's a shoebox in the closet with some cash in it. It's all yours. Please, just don't hurt my wife. Don't hurt us." The room was still. There were only Emily's trembling wheezes and the scraping of an animal on the roof, long claws, ripping at the shingles. "It's very simple," the man said. His voice was steady and monotone, softening at the end of each sentence, as if he was bored. "Do as I say. If you don't, I'll kill you both. First thing I want you to do is get out of bed and walk with me to the living room. Can you do that?" Neither Emily nor Caleb answered, so the man raised his voice and repeated the question. "Yes," they both said in unison. "Good." Emily tugged on Caleb's arm. She needed him. He'd managed to avoid capture during his 6 years of duty in the Middle East, but he knew plenty who hadn't, and the ones who had made it out always said the best thing to do was to make the aggressors feel as if they were in total control. I'll stop there. Thank you very much for listening. Forest for the Trees and Other Stories, available where books are sold. I hope you'll check it out, and I hope you'll find me on Instagram at Writes from LA, Writes with a W, and we can stay connected. Thanks very much for listening.